The Sign on the Door by Sam Goodings. "This is madness, Sigmund, to stay. You must know that," said the senator. "These Nendrin are animals. Think of your family." "I have thought of my family," said Sigmund. "They have decided their duty is to remain beside me, and my duty lies with Angora." "There is no Angora. Not any more. We must flee across the sea while there is time. Soon Lokia Kenneth will come and install himself Governor-General. What hope then do you think there will be for retainers to the old king?" "The old king? He has been in the ground for less than a month," said Sigmund. Silence settled between the men, and the gulf between them grew. They stared at each other, neither prepared to look away, old friends parting for a final time. The wind whistled, the rain fell. The airship hummed as the last members of the High Conclave shuffled aboard under the scrutiny of Sigmund's gaze. "He is a fool! Leave him!" shouted Dravin, the Chancellor Prime, already aboard the Conclave Zeppelin. "Does it make a man a fool to have honour?" Sigmund called back. Dravin snorted. "After Lokia has taken you beneath the Green Palace and stuck a burning rod up your arse, you won't feel the same." Only one member of the conclave remained and boarded now. He reached out and placed a hand on Sigmund's broad shoulder. "I know nothing I say will change your mind, my friend," said Senator Callis. "But they are right. You achieve nothing for Angora by dying pointlessly for an ideal." "Our king did not feel the same," Sigmund said. "Aye, it was a glorious few years," Callis mused, "but it was always doomed. Nations are ruled by necessity, not right action. You know this. He was too good to be a king. Kings must be ruthless and hard, always. There is no room for compassion in the heart of a ruler. I would sooner follow a dead king whose heart was ruled by compassion than follow 6 cowards in flight," Sigmund said. Callis fell back as if struck. "Your words hurt me, friend. They have the sting of truth to them. You are right. We are afraid, and hopeless, and lost. Yet what can we do?" "You are the High Conclave of Angora, for the love of the goddess. What are the people?" Sigmund demanded. Callis shrugged. "Seems we do not care for them. We seek only to avoid the noose, the block, and the twist of the rack. What are the people next to that?" "You were a great general once," said Sigmund. "Where is that man?" "Perhaps old age has stolen my courage. Perhaps I never truly was that man," said Callis. "You are barely in your 50s, Sigmund. Your hair is silvered, but the strength of youth is not completely spent. If you live another 20 years, even you will know the terrors of infirmity. Courage rots quicker than the flesh." "Come on, get a move on down there!" Dravin screamed from the airship. "This will be your last chance, Sigmund. Please?" Callis offered. There was not even room in Sigmund's heart for a moment of temptation. "You wish me to leave my office, my city, my country? I am First Sword of Angora. I will not scurry away with my tail between my legs." "Then I wish you a quick and honourable death, although I fear you will receive anything but," said Callis. Then he turned and walked up the gangway. He did not look back as his attendants helped him board. Sigmund stood, ignoring the cold and rain, and watched as the crew prepared the airship for launch. It did not take long, and once freed from its tethers, the vessel rose slowly into the bright blue, heading towards the sea. Doing his best to suppress his anger, Sigmund cut through the market district as he returned to his residence. The stalls were still trading, but the atmosphere was muted. The stages where acrobats and jugglers usually performed were deserted, and there was no longer music from the regular bands of musicians. The Nendrin had banned all such frivolity. People scurried, eyes down, intent on completing their own business as quickly as possible. As he passed through the central plaza, he glanced with regret at the plinth that had supported the likeness of the late king. The statue of King Adalak lay in pieces where the invading Nendrin forces had pulled it from its mounting. Adalak had been that precious rarity in royal lines. A good man. A man of conscience and mercy, tempered with charisma and personal prowess. Sigmund had trained the young royal since he had been a boy, As first sword, he had trained many princelings and lords. Under his tuition, all had become excellent swordsmen. Adelec was different. It was not that he was more gifted. In fact, he had not taken to the sword naturally at all. But he had truly desired to be great. He had worked harder, longer, and more willingly than the others. Sigmund had learned that he was the same in all his lessons, possessed with a desire to excel. Adelec's reign had lasted only 3 short years, but they had been the proudest in Sigmund's career. The young king had made decisions ruled by what was right, not by what was expedient. As such, he had become a ruler truly loved by his people. Yet, in doing so, he had made many enemies at court and abroad, and now he was dead, betrayed by his own blood and speared through the side in a Nendrin ambush. He had been only 4 miles from his capital. It was said his head had been cut from his body and placed on a spike outside the palace at Rin. Adelec's younger brother, Oric, had taken the crown and installed himself upon the throne. He had sent a host of Nendrin mercenaries to Angora carrying his seal. The latest news reported that now Oric had gone cap in hand to the Thandril Empire, issued a full apology for his nation's previous move towards independence, and sworn loyalty once more to the despotism of the Eben Council. Lokia Caneth, the council's most decorated general, was to arrive within the month to rule the city. Sigmund knew Lokia well enough, a disciplinarian who governed with a lash and the gallows. Sigmund stopped at a fruit and vegetable stall and waved a greeting to its owner, Reed. The shopkeeper acknowledged Sigmund with a nod before turning back to a customer. Sigmund took the moment to look through the sorry selection in front of him. Food was hard to come by since the Nendrin occupation. The plainsmen had been here less than a month, and already they were picking the city dry. Reed approached, looking thin and gaunt, his skin white like paper. "By the goddess, is this all there is?" Sigmund asked. Reed nodded. "All the good stuff's been confiscated. Was all I could do to get this lot," he gestured to the fare on offer. "I put this aside for you, though," he finished, producing a basket from below the counter. Sigmund scanned the contents without comment. Most of the vegetables were rotten and blackened. Even so, he handed over 2 gold sovereigns. Reed took the money somewhat hesitantly. He knew the meagre offering was worth but a fraction of what was being paid. He moved to speak, but Sigmund cut him off. "For all the years you've allowed me discount." "I am very grateful," said Reed, tears beginning to form in his eyes. Sigmund knew him to be a proud man and doubted the gold alone would prompt such a display. "How bad is it?" Sigmund asked. "It's the little ones, my daughter's youngsters. There's barely enough to go around," Reed said. "I'm not bothered about me, I can manage, but by the goddess, they're thin." Sigmund placed the food basket back on the table. "Keep it. We're not short. I'll see something else is sent to you by sunset." "I can't," Reed said. "Don't be ridiculous, man," said Sigmund. "We're friends. Friends stick together." Thank you, I mean it. I won't forget this," said Reed, clasping Sigmund's hand. "Think nothing of it," said Sigmund. As he turned onto the corner of his street, Sigmund could not say he was relishing the afternoon. He was feeling weak from lack of food himself, and Marie would chew his ear off about not bringing anything home. Once again, the door outside his house was thronged with people. He counted 6 Nendrin amongst them, easy to spot in their crude furs. "Excuse me, make a path," he called, clearing them from his door. A tall, dark-eyed Nendrin stepped forward. "We're here for the challenge, little man." Bright bird feathers hung from his wolfskin headpiece, and his breath stank of salted mutton. Sigmund's belly rumbled. "I know," said Sigmund. "However, you will have to wait, like everyone else." The Nendrin chuckled. "If we were on the plains, I would already be wearing your skin." Sigmund's lips drew into a tight line. Perhaps. Pushing past the challenger, he freed the keys from his pocket and unlocked his front door. A sign was hung upon it. "The first sword of Angora accepts all honourable challenges as is just and right." It was the custom that every first sword had followed since the founding of Angora. To lose or decline was to surrender the honour of the post. In early history, the challenges had been more bloodthirsty, often to the death. Now duels were typically fought with wooden weapons. For many years, honour had dictated that only a single challenger would come each day, and Sigmund had taken to inviting the men and women he defeated to join him for lunch after the contest was concluded. Now little honour remained, and packs of Nendrin lurked on his doorstep dawn and dusk, challenging one after another, hoping to wear him down. Even so, none yet had come close to defeating him. Sigmund pushed open his door, but before he could step into his house, a hand reached through the crowd and grabbed his wrist. He turned to see Geese. "Back again, my friend?" "We are not friends," said Geese. "We could be, if only you let go of your ego for a moment," Sigmund smiled. Geese turned his lip. "I came here for a challenge, but things have changed. These Nendrin have no valour. They do not wait their turn. They challenge en masse. It is not right. While this goes on, you should allow me to be your second." Sigmund was at once touched. He and Geese had been rivals for years, hardly able to hold a conversation. Geese was desperate to defeat him. Now he offered aid. For a moment Sigmund saw the true man his rival was, and was pleased. One day he would make a worthy first sword. "I would be honoured to have you second me," Sigmund said. Geese nodded, and Sigmund held the door open for him. "Hey, why is he first?" the tall Nendrin shouted, climbing to his feet. "He's not a challenger, he's my friend," said Sigmund. "Now quiet down. You'll get your chance soon enough." "We're not friends," Geese muttered as the door closed. "It's just I'm going to be the one to beat you. Don't want one of these dogs doing it first." Sigmund smiled, leading his companion through the practice hall and into the living space beyond. "This has to stop," said Marie as she heard the kitchen door open, not looking up from where she stood dicing the last of their vegetables and dropping them into a pot. "I can't think, with all the noise out there. The number of challenges grows each day." Sigmund encircled her with his arms and kissed her behind the ear. "Geese is concerned too." Marie turned her head. "Master Geese," she said, with a polite nod. "Ma'am." Geese bowed, taking a seat at the table. "So you're going to stop it or not?" Marie asked, turning her attention to her husband. "It's getting dangerous." "The challenge has been a tradition in Angora for more than 500 years. I won't be the one to stop it," said Sigmund, hoisting the pot of vegetables and carrying them to the stove. "Why not? Everyone has seen the Conclave's airship leaving. Why must you cling to your honour when our betters have none?" Sigmund shrugged. "You have beaten all comers for 20 years, Marie sighed. "What more is there?" Sigmund did not respond, so Marie turned her attention to Geese. "Do you know when he ate last?" Geese shook his head. "It's been 4 days since he had a proper meal." "Ah, but it was an especially wholesome meal, cooked with love and wonder by my beautiful wife," Sigmund said, throwing a wink at Geese. Geese could not completely keep his face straight. "Don't give me that," said Marie. "You're not a spring chicken anymore. One of these foreigners is going to kill you." "Your wife is right," said Geese. "You are not as young as you were." "Oh, is that concern I hear?" Sigmund asked, raising a brow. "Call it respect," said Geese. "I have never cared for you much as a man, too flippant for my liking, but that does not mean I do not hold you in the highest esteem." "Your time will come, Geese. I barely bested you last time. What are you, 25? asked Sigmund. 26, said Geese. "I was the youngest man ever to become first sword, and I did not do it until I was 32, Sigmund pointed out. "I know," said Geese. Sigmund smiled, about to speak, but the back door opened and Lance came in from the yard, warming his hands by the fire. "Hello, father," said the youth. "Master Geese," he added with a respectful bow. "How is his training?" asked Geese, looking the boy up and down. Sigmund looked at his son and smiled. "He's doing okay." "One day, boy," said Geese, taking a long, hard look at Lance, "you will wait to defeat me, like I have waited to defeat your father." "Perhaps," said Lance, with only the faintest hint of a smile. Geese snorted. "I see he's already developed your irritating brand of confidence. He is like ice but colder, like the dye of the blue mountain flower, but bluer, like the rays of the summer sun, but warmer, and I am very proud of him," said Sigmund, ruffling his boy's hair. Geese scoffed. "What was that? Poetry?" "When you are a father, you will understand," said Sigmund, fetching his wooden sword from where it hung above the kitchen door. "Lance, you remember Reed from the market and where he lives?" "Yes, father," said Lance. "I need to take him some food." "We have precious little ourselves," Marie put in. "That is true, we have little, but then they have none," said Sigmund. "So take them some bread, what fruit we have, and the rest of that block of cheese. Do we have any meat?" 2 pheasants that I've been hanging for a few days, and a dove I caught this morning, said Lance. Take them a pheasant, then 2. Go now, through the back, and be careful. The streets are not as safe as they were. Yes, father, said Lance, heading to the larder. Shall we? Said Sigmund, loosening his sword arm and gesturing to the training hall. Geese nodded and rose. The first 3 bouts ended quickly. Geese watched as Sigmund disarmed the 3rd challenger with a smooth roll of his wrist, sending the Nendrin's wooden sword clattering to the floor. Fury burned in the Nendrin's eyes, and Geese found his hand sliding towards the hilt of his own blade. However, angry as he was, the defeated man walked backwards to the door and stormed out into the street. He was not the first to leave without accepting the customary bowl of soup offered to challengers. Geese did not think Marie would mind that overmuch. The door to the training hall creaked again, and the large Nendrin who had confronted Sigmund earlier entered. Now we will see your skills, little man, he sneered, and we will see if I will wear your skin. Begin in your own time, Sigmund invited. Without pause, the plainsman ran forward, a large mallet raised above his head. A moment later, he was curled up on the floor, gasping. Geese suppressed a smile. Sigmund had jabbed his wooden sword into the man's liver point. Geese had suffered such a blow himself and knew it to be agonizing. 2 more Nendrin needed to enter to drag the big man away. He would likely pass blood in his urine for several days. There was a pause, and no others entered. Perhaps that is it for today, Sigmund suggested. Hardly had he finished speaking when 3 new Nendrin entered. Geese recognized Verata at once. Although the tribes had no official hierarchy, at least as he understood it, it was obvious that Verata held some station. The man was tall, rake-thin, and always attended by at least 2 other warriors. He had already challenged Sigmund on 3 occasions, finding himself soundly beaten each time. Back again? Sigmund asked. Back for your head, Verata growled, drawing his sword. Steel flashed in the fading sunlight. This is an honourable challenge, Geese said, surging to his feet. No live blades. Do you not have the backbone for a real fight? Verata scoffed. Battles with steel only ever end one way, said Sigmund. No one needs to die. I am not concerned if you are not, said Verata. I have thought about our last fights. I think with steel I would have won. Then you are a fool, said Sigmund. This time I am going to cut you down, slowly, spat Verata. You are not half as good as your reputation. Perhaps. Arm yourself, snapped Verata. Geese moved to the wall where Sigmund's long blade rested, but the swordmaster waved him back. This will do, said Sigmund, holding up his practice sword. There is no danger here. As you wish, said Geese, far from convinced. The Nendrin moved forward and circled, his blade held in a high guard. Despite his bravado, the warrior from the plains looked tense. Sigmund, on the other hand, looked as relaxed as ever, his wooden sword held low to his left side, his grip almost careless. Verata did not wait long to make his move, stepping forward with a downward cross cut. Sigmund raised his weapon to his head and sidestepped, redirecting the blow. Sigmund could not meet force with force. The Nendrin's steel would cut his wooden sword in 2 if he did, but it was a beautiful example of the soft overcoming the hard. Surprised by the lack of resistance, Verata overcommitted, losing his balance. In that moment, Sigmund struck, tapping the point of his sword to Verata's head. Verata snarled, stepping away and kicking the floor. Again, he demanded. As you say, Sigmund complied. Verata changed his grip, taking a one-handed hold. He hesitated for a moment, as if in thought, then produced a long knife from beneath his furs. Geese was about to object, but again Sigmund waved him back. Verata began to circle, menacing with both weapons, swaying his body as if about to attack, then checking. Sigmund watched him closely, his face unreadable. The 2 men squared off for over a minute, as each waited for the other to make a move. Geese took the opportunity to look over the 2 tribesmen Verata had brought with him, making sure neither looked to tip the odds. Both men stood, arms folded, hands away from their weapons. Satisfied, Geese looked back to the duel. As he did, Verata tensed, the slightest pull to his left shoulder, a twitch of his right foot. Hardly anything the average man would notice, but, for a man with the experience of Sigmund, Verata might as well have announced his plan to attack with a full marching band. Geese remembered a quote of which his own teacher had been fond. They move, you move first. He had not seen it so perfectly exemplified before. Sigmund intercepted Verata's attack before it had started, striking Verata's left wrist and knocking the long knife to the floor, then bringing his sword to sit at Verata's neck. You lose, Sigmund said. Verata growled in fury. His left hand grabbed the end of Sigmund's wooden blade, holding it fast. At the same time, he slashed the point of his own sword towards Sigmund's neck. Geese began to move, knowing that he would be too late. But Sigmund leaned backwards, rolling slightly to one side. The tip of Verata's sword drew a line across Sigmund's forehead. Blood sprayed. Sigmund rolled away in a smooth half-step. Then, as Verata's sword cleared him, he flowed back in. Locking Verata's hand with his own, he threw the tribesman, using his practice sword for leverage. Verata landed heavily, a sickening crack sounding from his left wrist. The tribesman was still not done. Even as he screamed in pain, his right hand sought his fallen dagger. Sigmund smashed his sword into Verata's jaw. Teeth sprayed. Verata lay still. The two men who had come with Verata dropped their hands to their blades, but Geese drew first and stepped forward to stand beside Sigmund. The plainsmen looked at the two swordsmen and slowly removed their hands from their weapons, moving instead to the prone form of Verata. They hefted him, still semi-conscious, and dragged him silently from the hall. The night air was cold and damp. The swordmaster lay on top of the covers, dressed only in his nightshirt. Marie bent over him, dabbing at the wound on his head. I have acted badly, said Sigmund. Anger took me, fear too. I should not have struck him so. Marie snorted. You should have knocked his brains out, not just his teeth. It was wrong. He was no threat. I am lessoned for it. You will live, even so. You're a stupid man, but I love you for it, she said, kissing his cheek. Wrapping his arms around her, he pulled her down, lightly kissing her lips. She kissed back, and by candlelight they made love. Afterwards, as they lay together, time stretching on, content in their silence, Marie watched Sigmund's eyes grow heavy and begin to close. Have you locked up? She whispered. Stretching, he shook his head and yawned. We must talk about the future, Marie said. Even Geese said you should reconsider now. These men are not worthy of you. I could have lost you tonight. Perhaps it is time to change. Your son still needs your guidance. Sigmund remained silent. I know you believe that you must preserve our traditions. I know that you have sworn this code until death. But make it honour you stand for, not fear. I know you would stand against any enemy, but are you brave enough to stand aside when it is time? Climbing from the bed, he walked to the front door. Outside the air was chill. He looked at the sign on his door and allowed his finger to trace the cut across his brow. It had been a dishonourable attack, but even a few years ago, he would have completely evaded it. Where have the years gone? He wondered, looking up through the clear night sky to the moon. I am nearly as silver as you now. He thought of Lance and Marie, and of Sophia, the daughter they had already lost. A few inches lower, and his throat would have been opened. What would have become of them if he were slain? These were uncertain days. Perhaps, he conceded, it was time to retire. He could pass the title to Geese. He took the simple sign from his door. He remembered the look his predecessor had worn when he had handed it over. It had been a look that mingled both regret and joy. Sigmund had not understood that look then, but he did now. Tucking the sign under his arm, he went inside, locking the door behind him. He placed it against the wall. I will sleep on it, he said to himself. Then, with a yawn, he headed for bed. He had hardly got a few steps when a loud knock came from the door behind him. It is late! Come back tomorrow! He shouted. There was silence, and then the knock came again. Taking a short blade from his weapons rack, Sigmund opened the door. A tall man in a hooded jerkin stood in the yard. A large sword sat across one of his shoulders. Sigmund scanned the shadows behind the man, but could see no others. It is late, said Sigmund. No challenges at this hour. The man said nothing, and raised his sword. Sigmund looked at the blade. It was a large, old cavalry sword, typically used for fighting from horseback, a mighty weapon, but not one in vogue. The man seemed to struggle under its weight. Sigmund sighed. "Very well," he said, ushering the man inside, "but make it quick." The hooded figure said not a word, and followed the swordmaster, closing the door behind him. Sigmund took up his practice sword, then turned to face the hooded man. In the shadows of the hall it was impossible to make out the man's face inside the black opening of the cowl. The robed man hefted his sword, then lowered it, holding it to one side, completely exposing his left flank to attack. Sigmund affected an orthodox two-handed grip. The challenger's stance was unusual, neither the long, narrow stance of the northern school, nor the high, shallow one of the river system. The hooded man took a slow step forward, feeling his way with his feet. Sigmund was caught in indecision as the challenger advanced. The long sleeves of the robe prevented Sigmund from seeing with which grip the man held his sword. The robed man advanced steadily, changing neither gait nor guard. Sigmund stepped backwards, still weighing up the challenger. He had met a few swordsmen who practiced from such fixed positions, repeating and repeating devastating counterattacks to an opening. It was, in general, a limited style, but it could be deadly in one-on-one encounters. Sigmund's heart skipped as he realized what was happening. Someone had come to him for a challenge, observed his techniques, while masking their own. Now they had concealed themselves so as not to give him any advantage. The swordmaster felt a bead of sweat pushing through the skin of his forehead. He stepped backwards. The challenger advanced steadily. Sigmund's mind closed. Suddenly he could see no entry. His every vision of attack ended with him run through, his wife widowed, his son fatherless. Gathering his wits, he feinted forward, trying to draw a reaction, but the tall man kept to his slow, stepping advance, completely unconcerned by Sigmund's actions. The first sword of Angora continued to back off, an unfamiliar feeling of panic rising in his chest. Once more he tried to feint, this time stepping left, then cutting right and changing his lead foot. The robed man did not react. In a step or two, Sigmund knew he would be at the back of the training hall. He had nowhere else to go. This was it. He thought of his life studying the blade. Could he have truly expected a different end? And with that thought, strangely, his panic was replaced with great stillness, a lightness. If it is now, let it be now, he thought. He stepped forward and raised his wooden sword in attack. It was, in every way, a perfect movement, the finest Sigmund would ever perform. The robed man did not move as Sigmund raised his blade. He did not move as the weapon descended. He did not move until Sigmund's sword bounced from his head with a dull crack. Then with a cry, the cloaked challenger fell backwards to the floor, spilling his blade as his hood slipped from his head. Sigmund's mouth fell open. "Reed? What in the name of the abyss are you doing?" The merchant looked up somewhat sheepishly, rubbing at the already grown bump on his head. "I'm sorry. I was just so hungry." "Hungry?" Sigmund frowned. "Speak sense, man. You have been so kind already, but even with the food you sent, there was little for me to eat. It is well known that you break bread with all your challenges, so I figured I'd brave a bump to the head for a bowl of soup," said Reed. "You could just have asked," Sigmund said, pulling the man to his feet. "I've already accepted too much from you. It seemed right that I should earn it. Why did you wait so long before you bested me?" Sigmund shook his head. "I thought you were a master waiting to kill me. You advanced with the resolve of a man without fear." "That is only because I had my eyes shut," Reed said. "Thought I might cower if I saw the blow coming." Sigmund laughed. "In the last few moments you have taught me more about the sword than I have learned in 100 challenges." "I have? Do I still get to eat?" Sigmund clapped the man on the back. "Of course, a double helping. Sit yourself in the kitchen. I'll be with you in a moment." Placing his sword against the wall, Sigmund picked up the sign and once more hung it in its rightful place.